Once upon a time, there lived a rich man whose wife had fallen gravely ill. As she lay in bed, she called for her only daughter, Cinderella, to come close to her side. "My dear child," she whispered softly, "when I am gone, be kind and good. Remember, God will always protect you, and I will look down upon you from heaven." The kind mother smiled one last time, closed her eyes, and passed away peacefully. Cinderella cried at her mother's grave every day, her heart full of love and longing. Her father traveled often for work and decided to remarry so someone could care for Cinderella. He married a proud and cruel woman who had 2 daughters of her own. At first, they pretended to love Cinderella, but soon their true nature was revealed. They made Cinderella do all the housework, cleaning, cooking, and washing. While they sat on soft sofas eating fruits, she swept the dusty floors silently. One day, her stepsister threw fruit peels on the floor, laughing as Cinderella cleaned. "Cinderella," yelled her stepmother, "can't you do anything properly, you lazy girl?" "Yes, mother," Cinderella replied softly, tears glistening in her eyes. She was never allowed to eat with them. "You can eat the leftovers," said her stepmother coldly. At night, Cinderella slept alone in the cold attic, with only mice and birds for company. Those little creatures became her friends, sharing crumbs and keeping her company. Days passed like this: hard work, hunger, and loneliness. One morning, a royal messenger rode through the town, shouting a grand announcement. The king invites all young maidens to the palace for a royal ball. The prince will choose his bride at the ball this Saturday. Everyone in town was filled with excitement, including Cinderella. "Oh, how wonderful it would be to see the palace," she said dreamily. Her stepmother called out, "Girls, we must prepare for the ball. One of you may become a princess." "Yes, mother," shouted the 2 sisters eagerly, while Cinderella helped them get ready. She brushed their hair, ironed their gowns, and polished their shoes without a word. "Cinderella," said one sister rudely, "fix my hair. I want the prince to look at me first." Cinderella smiled and obeyed, though her heart ached with quiet sadness. When everything was ready, Cinderella whispered shyly, "May I go to the ball too?" The stepmother burst into laughter. "You, look at yourself. You have no gown to wear." Her sisters joined in. "Everyone will laugh at you. Stay home and clean instead." As the carriage rolled away, Cinderella stood by the door, tears streaming down her face. She sat near the fireplace and whispered, "I wish I could see the palace, just once." Then she remembered her late mother's old wedding gown, though it was torn and faded. She began to sew, and her little bird and mouse friends came to help her stitch and mend. Just as she finished sewing the last piece, a soft light filled the room. A beautiful woman stood before her. "Don't cry, my dear. I am your fairy godmother." "Fairy godmother," gasped Cinderella. "But how can you help me?" The fairy smiled. "You shall go to the ball, my dear. Now, let's get you ready." With a wave of her wand, Cinderella's old dress turned into a shining blue gown. Her worn shoes became sparkling glass slippers, dazzling like stars. Then, pointing her wand at a pumpkin, it magically turned into a golden carriage. The mice became white horses, and the birds turned into coachmen in tiny hats. "Oh, thank you, godmother. But what about my stepmother and sisters? They might see me." "They will never recognize you, child," said the fairy with a wink. "But remember, this magic will last only until midnight. You must return before the clock strikes 12. "Yes, godmother, I promise," said Cinderella, her heart fluttering with joy. She stepped into the golden carriage, waved goodbye, and set off toward the palace. When she arrived, everyone turned to look. No one had ever seen such grace and beauty. Her stepmother and stepsisters were stunned but didn't recognize her at all. As soon as Cinderella entered the ballroom, all eyes turned toward her in awe. The prince stopped in the middle of the dance floor, completely mesmerized. He walked straight to her and said softly, "May I have this dance, beautiful lady?" Cinderella blushed. "Of course, Your Highness," she whispered shyly. The music began, and the two danced gracefully across the floor, as if floating on air. Everyone watched in silence, wondering who this mysterious young woman could be. The prince could not take his eyes off her. "You are the most wonderful person I've ever met." Cinderella smiled but said nothing, afraid that her secret might be discovered. They talked and laughed, and hours passed like minutes. Cinderella was so happy that she completely forgot about her godmother's warning. Suddenly, the large clock began to strike 1, 2, 3. "Oh no, it's midnight," she cried and ran toward the grand stairs. "Wait, please don't go," shouted the prince, chasing after her. As she ran down the stairs, one of her glass slippers slipped off her foot. She didn't stop to pick it up, she had no time. The prince grabbed the shoe gently. He looked around, but Cinderella had already disappeared into the night. Outside, her carriage turned back into a pumpkin, and her gown changed into rags again. Breathing heavily, Cinderella hurried home, thankful she wasn't seen. She reached her attic, fell to her knees, and smiled dreamily. "I danced with the prince," she whispered, holding her remaining glass slipper. The next morning, the entire kingdom buzzed with rumors of the mysterious girl. The prince called his royal guards and made a solemn announcement. "I will marry the woman whose foot fits this glass slipper," he declared. The guards began their search, visiting every house, every town, every maiden. But no one could fit into the delicate glass shoe. Finally, they arrived at Cinderella's house, where her stepmother greeted them with fake smiles. "Oh, my lord, my daughters were at the ball. Perhaps one of them is the girl you seek." The first sister forced her foot into the shoe, but it was too small. The second tried too, pushing hard, but still, it did not fit. "Are there no other girls in this house?" asked the guard. The stepmother stammered, "And no, only my two daughters live here." But just then, one of the guards noticed a locked door leading to the attic. "What's in there?" he asked suspiciously. The stepmother turned pale. "Oh, nothing, just an old storage room." The guard broke the lock open, and to his surprise, he found a young woman by the window. It was Cinderella, quietly sewing her torn dress, unaware of what was happening. "My lord," shouted the guard, "there is another maiden here." The prince, who had come with them, rushed inside the house. When he saw Cinderella, his heart leapt. "It's you," he said softly. He handed her the glass slipper. "Please, try it on." Cinderella sat down nervously and slipped her foot into the shoe. It fit perfectly. The room fell silent. The stepmother and sisters stood frozen, unable to speak. The prince smiled warmly. "Now, know you are the one I've been searching for." He knelt down before her and said, "Cinderella, will you marry me?" Tears of joy filled her eyes. "Yes, my prince, I will." The prince took her hand and led her to the royal carriage waiting outside. They rode together to the palace, where the king and queen welcomed her with open arms. Cinderella's father was also invited, and when he saw his daughter, his eyes filled with pride. The wedding was grand and beautiful. Everyone in the kingdom celebrated with joy. Even the birds and mice from the attic came to watch their dear friend become a princess. From that day on, Cinderella lived happily in the palace, kind and graceful as ever. She never forgot her humble past or her friends who stood by her through it all. And so, the story of the gentle girl who believed in kindness came true. Cinderella and the prince lived happily ever after.